Well, Lisa, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be a part of this series. I've enjoyed this series, attending over the last few months during this period of the COVID-19. I think this would be my fifth, this one being my fifth time attending one of these events. And I've learned so much from the speakers you've had, and it's an honor to be part of this myself. This morning, I want to share something with everyone about the value of rediscovering your creative voice. And as you shared, my background is varied. I began my business career in my early 20s, really pursuing real estate and mortgage banking. But the adventurous side of my life, I always describe my life as following two specific tracks. One track has been my professional entrepreneurial career. Presently, I'm the executive director of Cherokee Ranch and Castle Foundation, which is located down in AIGA, Colorado. And we're a historic cattle ranch that has a castle venue where we do a lot of cultural events. We're an SCFD Tier 3 member. And so it's a very dynamic place, a very creative place. And so my one track has been my professional life. The second track has been that of a supporter, actively supporting the arts and doing public service. What I want to share today is part of my story as far as my own path toward creativity. And this quote on my first slide here of the presentation comes from the book of Genesis 1:1. And it says that in the beginning, God created. And, being a person of faith, and I think most all religions around the world, there's a certain tenet in the beginning about the God's creation. And I think being made in the image of God, that's something that's inherent in all of us. I think as children, you take any child and put a piece of paper in front of a 2-year-old and something to draw with or to scribble with, and they'll quickly begin to, make marks on paper. And I remember as a child, my brother and I taking paper plates and drawing steering wheels on those paper plates and running around the house pretending like we were driving cars. I mean, the creative mind is something that's a gift given to children. And then through the course of our lives, we either feed into that creativity or that creativity separates from our active day-to-day life. And then, of course, there are a lot of people that fall in between in terms of their impact in communication with creativity. In my case, I have loved and supported the arts all my life. I'm presently a member of the Denver Art Museum Trustees Board. I've been there since 2002. I've also been a past board member of the Colorado Ballet. I served on the Denver Mayor's Office of Art, Culture, and Film for a number of years under Mayor Wellington Webb. I was actively involved in the Denver Great Arts for Great City program, which was the 1% for the Arts program that's still ongoing, and also served as a member of the Denver Foundation's Arts Grants Committee. So although through my personal and professional life, I was a major supporter of the arts as a patron and in board service and giving volunteer time, I really didn't begin to pursue an interest in becoming a creative until about 6 years ago. And where I started with that was with the guitar. I thought because of a childhood interest that I had, I remember the first time I heard the late Jim Croce sing and play his guitar on a show called Midnight Special. I remember going to my dad, I was maybe 8 or 9 years old, and just begging every day for a guitar. I wanted a guitar. And so that was a seed that was planted in childhood that really never flourished. And so, coming to a place a few years ago where I decided I wanted to pursue creativity in my life, the guitar was a natural thing for me to pick up. So the first thing I did is I found a great teacher. Eric Davies is the person in the photograph with me. That photograph was taken on the deck of my home. On the first day he showed up to give me my first guitar lesson. He'd been and still is the guitar teacher of my goddaughter. And so she referred him to me, and that's how that story went. Being a goal-oriented person, the first thing I did was I set a goal. And I told Eric, he said, what do you want to get from this experience? The first day we sat down together, and I said, within 1 year, or on the 1-year anniversary of my starting this, so a year from today, I would like to be able to have written, arranged, and recorded a song. No lofty goals. And so Eric, being just the kind person that he is, he said, okay, well, let's make that happen. And that's what we did. We spent a year learning the guitar, and I wrote this song called Summer Day. It's on the internet. We wrote it, I arranged it, I played the bass guitar and did the vocals in it. And we recorded it and mixed it in his studio in November, the year following my start. So what's interesting about that is, although I achieved my goal, I had not found my voice. I wasn't made to be a guitar player singer. I don't have a voice that would allow me to probably pursue that on any kind of a level that I think I would be actively doing that. And so although I still play the guitar, I still have a lot of guitars, I'm a collector at heart, it just wasn't really what I was meant to do. Lisa had mentioned that through my lifetime, I have been someone involved with horses. And I started jumping horses in my 20s and showing horses. And this particular horse that I'm going to show you a little bit of a video of me on is a horse named Missy Highbrow. She's a beautiful animal. She's a horse that I purchased about a year before this video was taken, and had a lot of problems with her. She just had a lot of, I call it PTSD. You know, horses are like any other thinking being, that events that happen to them in their lifetime leave scars. And she had a definite trigger problem that I had spent a little bit of time trying to solve. The important thing about this video is it was taken literally within 24 hours before an accident that changed my life. And as you can see in the video, she's going nice and smooth. Anybody that would have walked into the barn that night and witnessed us working together would not see anything that would lead to you to think that there was anything that was going to be problematic with this horse. It was a beautiful Saturday. It was in February on the 3rd in 2018. I just finished training my jumping horse, and then was doing very similar exercises with Missy in an outdoor arena, and decided to go for a trail ride with a friend of mine over in Cherry Creek State Park. And we had a beautiful ride out, and on the way back, she became spooked and threw me. It happened very suddenly. It happened without any warning at all. And the consequence of that was that I broke my neck. Now, when it happened, I didn't know I'd broken my neck. I lay there on the ground. I walked back to the barn because the horse had taken off for the barn. I drove myself to Parker Adventist Hospital, which ended up becoming a fortunate decision. I could have gone to the right and gone to Sky Ridge, or to the left and gone to Parker Adventist. And I went to Parker Adventist. Within a couple of hours, it was apparent after an X-ray, a CAT scan, an MRI, that something serious was going on. And I overheard the nurse mention to my wife that the surgeon was on his way down. And when I heard those words, I knew that something was seriously wrong. I had broken my neck. I had broken a facet on my C6, and was going to require a spinal fusion surgery the next morning. The doctor that I had met, the surgeon, Dr. Bradley Duhan, happened to be on duty. He's the chief of neurosurgery for the hospital, and happened to be on duty on that Saturday. And there was something in his presentation to me about my situation and showing me the scans that I didn't feel I needed a second opinion, although he offered that. And so I had to make this hard decision in a moment of time to go forward with the surgery. And in that moment, my life changed from that moment forward. And this photograph is really an important photograph, because this is the first day after about 9 weeks that I was allowed to leave my house after the surgery and the recovery. And I have a real spiritual connection to horses. I think horses are spiritual animals. And it was important for me, as soon as I could, to go out to the barn and to spend time re-engaging and bonding with this horse, and really letting her know that I was okay with what had happened. I understood why she did it. I understood the dynamics of what occurred. And my heart space was that I needed this horse to understand that we still had a relationship. And so this photograph was taken in that moment. I was told by Dr. Duhan that I was going to end up being basically sitting in a recliner chair and not allowed to leave my house or really do much in the way of any activity for about 8 weeks. I was talking to my mom on the phone the first day I got back from the hospital and explained this to her. And she said, you know, you're going to go crazy, because she knows me and I'm always active and in motion. And she said, I don't know how you're going to do it. And she said, you know, when you were a kid, you used to like to draw and paint. And so she said, why don't you start drawing? And so that was an idea that I thought was a good idea. When my wife got home that evening, I mentioned to her the conversation with my mom. She said, well, you know, you have all those paints that you bought, you know, a couple of years before. I was going to paint a little CD cover for this record or this song that I recorded that I never got to. And she said, why don't you go down and grab those or find those and just start painting horses? So I didn't paint horses, but I did start painting. I picked up the brush. And these first two images are the first two paintings I created. They're really small, little 4x4 canvas works that I did. And I had no intentions around what my outcome was going to be. I was just doing this to occupy time, to keep myself occupied mentally, and to, you know, have some type of a positive day-to-day activity to be doing while I was sitting here recovering from my accident. Like with many things, if you follow me on Facebook, you know, I tend to share everything. And so I decided to share these little paintings on my Facebook, and for no other reason, just to share, as I always do. And the feedback was really positive. People were saying, oh, that's really interesting, or they love the colors, or whatever it was. And it inspired me to continue doing more. So as my painting progressed, I became more and more serious about what I was doing. And I began to recognize the discovery of a creative voice through my art. I thought it was interesting that it really went all the way back, once again, to childhood, to that seed that was planted when I was a kid, loving to draw and paint, which I did a lot as a young kid. And that I felt like this is something far more natural than my efforts when I was working towards learning to play the guitar. And so my art began to take on its own creative voice. I began to develop a hand that I felt myself was recognizable. And then the feedback I received from some friends that were established artists seemed to confirm that, which was very motivating and inspiring to me. Something else interesting that happened was I began to understand the value of the muse in terms of, you know, as you're creating work, what is it that's inspiring you to decide what you're doing? When I approach a blank canvas, I'm not approaching that canvas with an outcome in mind. I don't sit down and say, I'm around a realist painter. I'm not sitting down and saying, I'm going to paint a horse today, or I'm going to paint the picture of a barn, or I'm going to paint a car, whatever the subject matter might be, a landscape. My form of expression is painting from the inside out, and the influences can be many things. It can be conversations I have, people I have engaged in relationship, people that I may have encountered randomly. This very session this morning might inspire what I do tonight when I paint. It's really a process of whatever my internal thoughts and processes and feelings are being expressed internally on the canvas. I began to recognize the symbolism in a lot of my paintings, and this is a really great example of it. Whenever I should show this painting on the left and say to somebody, what do you see? I would hear a lot of different thoughts or feedback. And the one that was most predominant, people say, well, I think I see a person. I think I see a profile of a person or a person's face. And this happens and continues to happen with my work, not intended. And so the illustration or the photograph on the right is intended to show you and make that more obvious to you as you view this particular painting. I learned creative process. I evolved from using brushes to then beginning to work with the palette knives, and began once again to evolve that voice and evolve that signature to make my work recognizable. Painting in very vibrant colors. So when you look at those initial couple of paintings I did, you know, very small canvases, you know, one or two colors, you know, very tight and controlled, and then over time becoming a lot more dynamic and open, a lot more bold with color selection, and a lot larger in terms of the scale of the paintings that I create. Evolving to large canvases was a big step for me. These two paintings, they're titled Transitions 1 and 2, are 42 inches wide by 60 inches tall. So these are large canvases. And again, it was just a process of just growing into really becoming an artist. I guess I'll say, from taking this initial step to really establishing a recognizable voice. Finally, as I evolved through this process, I established my own unique language. And language is many things when you talk about art. Your language can be certainly the tools you use that create a consistency in what people see and recognize that that is part of your voice. It can be the techniques that you use, and you create a vocabulary. The work that I do with palette knives is different than what I do with brushwork, but there's still a recognition that it's the same language. There are different expressions, different tools, different outcomes, but they all resolve themselves in a language that's very familiar. And my goal, once I began to establish artistic goals, was that if someone walked into a room and saw a painting, I would love it if they knew it was mine, without any labeling, that it just was that clear, just from the standpoint of my language. And establishing this unique language to express my inner life is the objective I have through my work. After about a year, almost exactly a year from the date I started painting, I hosted had my first show. I was invited to exhibit at an abstract art show in Parker at Deep Space Gallery. Resistant in the beginning to do it, because it really wasn't the reason that I began painting. The idea of sharing my work on Facebook through my social network of friends was a very different idea or experience than actually putting my work out there for people to come and actually see it. And then the idea of even feeling like my work was good enough to stand in a gallery amongst 5 or 6 other established artists in a major show like this was something that I just hadn't thought about doing, and really wasn't my intention. Ann Barheit, who was the curator of this particular show, talked me into doing it. And again, it was another opportunity for things to transform and for the story to kind of continue. So the picture on the left is of my first ever collector, Patrice. She bought this painting. It was funny when she came in with her family and was looking at the work and said, I really love this painting. And I said to her, thank you. And she says, I want to own this painting. I said, oh, that's really wonderful. And it took her about 3 times of trying to explain to me that she wanted to buy my painting. And it's a funny story that I'll always appreciate, from the first painting that I sold. That night at that show, I sold 4 paintings, and my major painting that was exhibited was awarded the People's Choice Award of the show. So it was really a great affirmation that I had discovered something that was really more natural to me than my attempt at playing music, and that was really meant to be, my path in terms of being a creative. So this is my family in the photograph on the right. And so it was just a really great night in celebration of the art. My creativity brought me full circle. And what I mean by this is there are these seeds I mentioned earlier that were planted in my youth. The one was the interest in guitars. The second one being that I loved to draw and I loved to paint as a child. The picture on the left is of the Parker Acoustic Society. They do their weekly jams at the Deep Space Gallery. And it was just kind of a neat experience to walk in there one evening and see them all sitting amongst my paintings playing their guitars, which I just really connected with, obviously, both the art, but also the idea that these guys were accomplished guitar players doing what they loved in the midst of my artwork. The picture on the right is really somewhat profound. The gentleman in the middle holding the piece of paper with the baseball cap on is Denver artist Bob Ragland, and he's an institution in the arts community. Most everyone knows who he is. I think he's 82 or 83 years old, and he's been around a long time. When I was a little kid, and I'm talking when I was maybe 11, 12 years old, I used to, every day that he was on television, he was on PBS, he had a show where he showed you how to draw and paint. And I used to mimic him all the time in my drawing. And it really was the thing that caused my mom to really want to help support me in my interest in drawing and art. And so this photograph was taken at the Veterans Arts Council Gallery in the Denver Art District down on Santa Fe. And we have this show called Sunday Art Brunch. And Bob gets out a lot and visits other artists and other shows. And he walked in one day. Now, I've gotten to know him over the years. And so it wasn't like I met him for the first time, but just the idea that he, who was so influential in my interest in art as a kid, was now standing in front of my work. And we were having conversations about art. And all the other artists that were in the gallery at the time began to gather around, which are the other individuals in the photograph. It was just an incredible experience. It was very rewarding. And I want to kind of put a little bit of a marker on that because I want to talk about this a little bit later as we go forward to helping you understand how to explore and discover your creative voice, some of the things that can happen that really will reward your life as an example of that. The other idea of how we've come full circle is this photograph, which was taken about 2 weeks ago. The doctor standing on the left, in the left photograph, is Dr. Bradley Duhan, literally the man that saved my life. This is the surgeon that did my intake when I went to the hospital after the equestrian accident. He's the one that sat down in front of me and in very plain language explained to me what my situation was. You know, amongst the things he told me to think about as I decided whether or not to accept the surgery, it was a long list, and one of them was that one of the risks was paralysis, whether I did the surgery or not, and another one was the possibility of loss of life because of the nature of the surgery and the length of time of the surgery and the complexity of it. And so, you know, being able to have confidence in what he was saying to me and making the decision to go forward without a second opinion, I really looked to Dr. Duhan and say, literally, this is the person that saved my life. So to be able to stand with him at Parker Adventist Hospital a couple of weeks ago, the day that we installed my latest show, which is a collection of 15 paintings at the Centura Health Healing Gallery at the Parker Adventist Hospital, was a monumental moment in terms of just marking my path. Now, the last thing I'll say about this accident and the recovery from that is really the discovery of my creative voice and the path my art has taken is the silver lining in what was a very profound and challenging moment in my life. I can't undo the brokenness in terms of my physical body or whatever trauma exists from the accident. But what I can do is look to the gateways that were opened as a result of it. Because literally the accident led me to the moment where I made the decision to pick up the paintbrush and achieve the goal of finding a creative voice. I personally feel that this is what I'll be doing, you know, literally for the rest of my life in terms of, you know, spending time, putting time into passion. When I, at some point in time, retire from my full-time job at the Cherokee Ranch and Castle Foundation, my hope would be that I have a long established career creating paintings and selling my art. And so that's the silver lining part to a challenging moment. And we all face challenges in our lives. And I think seeking creativity is one way of being able to overcome a lot of those types of situations. This photograph was taken in my studio about a month ago. I have a studio located on 7th and Santa Fe down in the Art District on Santa Fe. And, you know, I've really tried to immerse myself in the creative community, a lot of incredible people. So now I want to quickly jump into a discussion about how you can find your creative path. And so what my first piece of advice is to recall all the things that you loved to do as a child that were creative. Do any of them still resonate with you? I talked about, you know, loving the guitar. I talked about drawing and painting when I was a child. What are the things that you did when you were a child that, as you sit back and think about it, really resonate with you? And you say to yourself, maybe, you know, I wish I would have pursued that, or I found joy in doing that. Those are clues of things that might more naturally come to you in terms of your creative voice. And what I would recommend doing is making a list of everything that you have always wanted to try creatively throughout your lifetime. So if you've, you know, like I say, if you like music and you thought, well, it'd be fun to learn how to play an instrument, or, you know, painting, dancing, acting, you know, writing creatively, all these things can bring a lot of joy into your life and bring creativity into your life. So the pathway to finding creativity and discovering your creative voice is making a decision to explore your creativity with the intention of simply doing it for yourself. Now, I mentioned earlier that I had no intention of exhibiting my artwork. I was sharing it on social media, not as a function towards any particular end in mind. It was just simply a matter of sharing out like I always do. And, but making the decision that you really don't have to have an outcome that says, I'm not going to play music unless I can record in my music, or I'm not going to, pursue art unless I can sell paintings. It really should be something you're doing for your own gratification and to improve your own life in your internal life. Give yourself permission to not be great in the beginning, and accept that the process of opening up your creativity is worth every effort that you make. Now, I'm a hardcore goal-driven person. So in my case, making this profession to my guitar teacher that I wanted to record a song in a year fits my personality. But I don't say to you that that's something that I feel like you need to do unless that comes naturally for you to do something like that. Just the idea of knowing that starting out something creative, you're not going to probably be very good in the beginning. And you're going to need to spend time learning whatever it is you decide to pick up. But really, a lot of the joy is simply in the process of doing it. And that's one of the rewarding things of creativity. It's a natural thing, as I said before, and part of it's just removing the blocks that stand between you and the naturally God-given creativity that you already possess. I want to talk for a moment about the life-giving benefits of creativity. Creativity is physically healing. And I'll say to you that, if you spent a month with me every day, we ran around and, spent time together and went on hikes together and just day-to-day life, and I didn't share my story with you, I promise you would have no indication I had any issues at all. My outcome was as good as it possibly could have been, thanks to Dr. Duhan's skill. But I also believe that my time spent painting and my time spent going inward and what that did for my attitude while I was healing has a lot to do with my outcome as well. So I do believe that creativity is physically healing. It's one of the reasons I am honored to have the show at the Healing Gallery at Parker and Venice, is because I do know there's healing power in creativity. The second thing is it can be very healing emotionally. When you're creating, you find yourself in a point where there's really not a lot to think about other than the thing that you're doing. And so it's a great escape from whatever else is going on in your life. And the rewarding aspect of the outcomes that you're creating through creativity really feed you emotionally. And if you're an expressive person, it's an incredible way for you to share your internal life externally by the things that you create. And it's one of the things I love most about the process and the outcome of creating. And then finally, creativity can be very spiritually healing. I think that for me, the deeper I go into my creative life and the more that I begin to draw out my inspiration for my creativity, the closer I feel to my creator. And that quote I shared in the beginning from Genesis that God created, I feel just that kindred sense of spirit with God, and gratitude is a powerful emotion as I create work. And so I know that the healing aspect of creativity has been very powerful in my life, and I believe that it would be in yours as well. The path to discovering your creative voice is a very clear path. And I want to share with you just a few thoughts about what I've learned about it. You want to be bold in gathering everything you need to enter your creative life. So if you decide to pick up an instrument, be bold in going out and buying a quality instrument. If you're going to go out and decide to paint, spoil yourself with the tools. That can be a fun part of the experience during the time that you are beginning and learning to become good at what you're doing, is the enjoyment of the tools and the processes in creative work. Give yourself to the creative process. And what I mean by that is just simply, like I'm saying before, let go of the idea that it needs to be perfect when you first begin, and just give yourself to the process of it. Learning how to learn notes, or how to, place your fingers on the frets of a guitar, or how to pick up a paintbrush and hold it properly, or how to mix colors. All these things are process, but those are the things that will give you joy as you're on your path to learning how to become good at what you're doing. Share your journey with people who support you. This one's really important. You know, there are people in your life, in all of our lives, that are your, I call them dream stokers, right? The people that no matter what you do, they're going to support you and give you encouragement. There are also people in our lives that we maybe love just as much, but they're more given to the idea of pointing out the roadblocks to you or the consequences if things don't work out. That group of people, you should embrace those friends of yours like that, but they're probably not the people you want to share this newfound desire to explore your creative life. The people that you want to draw into your creativity are the people who are going to stoke those dreams. The people are going to look at your work or hear about what you're doing and be supportive, because it's easy to talk yourself out of creativity if you're not a creative and you're trying to explore this for the very first time. And then, as I said before, and I say it again because I really feel like it's important, is that you begin a creative process without an end in mind. You know, don't sit down and say, well, I'm not going to pursue it if I can't be great at it. The truth is there's potential in your natural gift of creativity, and you don't know if you're going to be great at it or not. And most that have become great at any form of creativity were in the exact same place that you had been in that moment and not really knowing. I want to share with you a few resources in closing that have been really helpful to me, and I think they'll help you as well. The first one is The Artist Way. It's a book study that was written on a spiritual path to higher creativity by Julia Cameron. A lot of new artists and established artists have entered into the Creative Way study. It is something that's very challenging because there's a lot of work involved in it. It really is a workbook, but it really will help you to discover your creative path. And if you're an established creative that feels blocked, like let's say maybe years ago you used to paint and you stopped doing that and you're having a hard time getting back to it. And that's the story for a lot of creatives. The Artist Way will help you unpack what has happened to create those blocks and help you to break through those barriers. So that's one I'd recommend. The other one is Manage Your Day-to-Day, and it's building your routine and finding your focus and sharpening your creative mind. And it's another great book by Jocelyn Glee. Still Like an Artist is 10 Things Nobody Told You About Being Creative. And it really talks a lot about the idea that artists are constantly borrowing from others. You know, some really great advice I was given a year or so ago was to learn whose shoulders you're standing on. And I think it's great advice. And if you look at the path of creativity in any form, whether it's, you know, painting, music, dance, creative writing, there's always references to artists that have come before. And so the idea that you seek inspiration in your life, but you also seek inspiration from those who have done what you seek to do is really great advice. And then finally, there's a wonderful Netflix series called Abstract, The Art of Design. And that documentary series explores creativity through a number of different channels: painters, illustrators, architects, people involved in choreography and film. And it's a very inspirational story, or series of stories that are done in many documentary form that are available on Netflix, but also the full episodes are available on YouTube, which is an interesting thing and easy to access. So making the connection, I'm very active on social media. My website, Facebook and Instagram are all there. James Holmes Studio, I do host studio tours. If anyone would be interested in coming to the studio, I always am interested in welcoming people to come down, and I love talking about art. Even in this COVID environment, we can, you know, practice good social distancing and put on some creative masks and have conversations and look at art. So Lisa, thank you so much for this opportunity, and I hope that this opened the minds of many in terms of interesting discovering your creative voice.
Thank you so much, James. And as we said in the previous day, I think you are a very inspiring person, and we want to give voice to our community, and you are the perfect example for that. I personally really love it. Guys, in the meantime, if you move your mouse toward the bottom, there is the Q&A icon. If you have any question for James, just write them there. And so, no, I think this was very inspiring. And we are recording the event. So tomorrow or tonight, you're going to get a recap email with all James' contacts if you didn't write them down. And also we can also include the address of your gallery. So if anyone want to go to Santa Fe, visit James, just send him a message and coordinate. And I'm sure we're gonna do something about that with AIG as well. So
forward to that.
we're gonna follow up on that. So going to your question, I actually have one from you. So the first one is, how did you come up with your style? Did you have any inspiration, or it just got expressed? It just happened.
In the beginning, I would say it just happened. Just in terms of, it's kind of interesting that in my interest and support of the arts community before pursuing painting, I'd always loved more literal, figurative artwork. I never really developed a love for abstract work as a consumer or a visual consumer of art, but it was all that I could do when I started painting. I mean, I don't think I've painted anything figurative or drawn anything figurative since starting this path. And so in the beginning, it was simply what was just coming out of my internal process. Now, there are artists that have influenced me as I began to draw closer into the decision to pursue my art more seriously. Local artist Carla Raines is someone who's a friend of mine that certainly inspired me in terms of her style and just some of the things that she's taught me really about painting with palette knife. There are international artists like Gerhard Richter, who is a German artist whose abstract work certainly influences my work. The second painting I did, which is one of the two that I showed you, has some influence of Clyfford Still. And it's interesting because I'd spent a lot of time over the last 5 years or so looking at Clyfford Still's work. And so I certainly think that there was a subconscious influence, both the color palette and the mark making, although on a very small scale, that reminds me of Clyfford Still's work. So I think my inspiration, my style, I think is uniquely mine. I do feel that it came from an internal expression outward, but I think there's influences on it by those artists that I mentioned. And certainly, you know, my consumption of artist biographies and videos and so forth over the last couple of years, I'm always looking for things that, you know, I think end up showing up in my work. So yeah, so there's a lot of inspirational resources out there.
We have a question from Kevin. He asks, I'm allowing my perfectionism get in the way. Would you recommend a process or a refocus in some way?
I would, and thank you for bringing that up, because that's something I think that a lot of us, whether it's playing music or dancing or painting, the seeking perfection, and I think seeking perfection, it will drive you to become greater than you may have been if you didn't have that as an expectation for yourself. But I think it could also create a block. And what I would do, my best advice would be, go further than you think you should go. So if you're painting and you feel like you are, you know, trying to become perfect, and so it's causing you to restrict yourself from making marks, or maybe adding another color, or creating more texture, or taking something away from the canvas, I would say to you, be willing to wreck a painting or 2 or 10, to push yourself beyond where you think you should go. Because I think what it'll do is it'll free you up from a predetermined idea of what perfection is. Some of the paintings I'm most proud of are ones where I literally got lost in the moment of painting. I have a practice of painting oftentimes late into the night. And very early on, I started just shutting off the lights when I was done painting. And I do something I call meeting the painting in the morning. So I'll, you know, come downstairs after a late night of painting and look at the painting really for the first time. Because in the act of creating the work, I like to let myself go in the work. So I'm not overthinking, and being analytical about it, but just really letting inspiration drive. So my advice would be, if you find yourself constrained by overthinking work to try to make it perfect, is to be willing to wreck those works and to give yourself to the process. And I think you'll be amazed at how much more freely your creativity will flow. And you may find the work to be completely different than you intended it to be, but it also might be a lot more just satisfying at the end. So
I think that's a great advice, and it resonates with myself too, because of course, when you have to do work for other people, it's always easy. When it comes to yourself, it's like, oh my God, this has to be perfect. You never start.
yes.
I mean, to me, it's about starting, and that's the first step.
That's right.
So we have another question from Liv. She said, what is one of the best or most worthwhile investment you have ever made? Could be an investment of money, time, energy, etc.
Wow, that is a great question. And I would say to you, the greatest investment I ever made was giving myself permission through my lifetime to pursue my passions. Anybody that knows me knows that whether it was when I was, actively jumping, I still have horses, and horses are still very much an important part of my life, but there was a period of time when I was pursuing show jumping. And there was a period of time in my life where I was actively involved in motor racing, driving. I drove in the American IndyCar Series in 1991. I've always given myself fully to whatever it is that I'm passionate about. So in some ways, it's investing in yourself, but I think to make it more proactive, I'd say invest in what you're interested in, and really go for it. I mean, really allow yourself to be unreasonable about your pursuit of something you care about, or something you want to learn about, or something you love. And I think that that's the greatest investment you can make in yourself in terms of ROI on your life, is investing in your passions.
I think that's a great advice. And it's about like going out of the box, and that's where the magic happens, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
So we have another question. Do you journal at all?
I do. I'm looking, my journal's upstairs right now. I do journal. And, I have a daughter, I'm older of my two daughters, who I think she probably has 30 journals. I am so envious of her to be able to look back over essentially her life to her teens, and be able to really explore and navigate her process whenever she chooses to do that. I'm not that good at it. I have a lot of journals around that I've started, and I'm a few pages in, and then I get busy or distracted, and I don't stay tasked to it. But the journal I'm working on right now and working through my creative process is probably the most focused I've ever been in journaling. And I think that what it does, it's less of a diary, but really more of putting things down that I want to remember. It can be a single sentence. It can be just a flow of conscious thought about something. Working through the artist way, doing these things I call morning pages, which essentially is 3 pages of journal entry a day as part of the process. And so writing a lot about creativity, writing about ideas, something I may have seen, a series. I have a journal that has different ideas for series that I want to do, although I don't think too much about individual paintings. I mentioned earlier, I approach a blank canvas without any preconceived ideas. But I do like the idea of thinking about series that I can do. Earth Elements is a series I'm working on. So I do journal, and it's about a lot of different topics, not in diary form, like I said before, but I think it's a powerful way to be able to express creativity, but also a way to be able to not forget good ideas, and a way of being able to work through things too, things that you're thinking about or contemplating doing.
Do you use that as an inspiration for your paintings later, or those are two different tools?
Yeah, they're two different things for me. So the only way that my journaling would influence my painting is to go back and say, oh yeah, I wanted to do this Earth Elements series, and I remember I made a note about something, a color palette or something like that. But as far as utilizing the journal to then translate to a painting, I've not gotten there yet. But I'm pretty young in my path. You know, I've only been doing this since basically March of 2018. So if we're talking 10 years from now, you know, I might say something different than I am today. But as of right now, the journaling is not influencing my actual paintings.
Now, it's very impressive that in only 2 years you have done so many things. Some artists takes like years, and starting like at an older age, and now when you were like super young and do so many like show and have your painting here and there, I think it's very rewarding. You should be proud of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been rewarding. Thank you.
So one question for you. Considering you have been so new in the abstract painting, if you have no limits of time, project, money, etc., what would be your dream project to do in the future?
Yeah, I would like to do a series of large scale paintings, and I'm saying, you know, 7 by 8 foot. I want to really attack a massive series of canvases, and I would like to do an exhibit of these works, maybe 14 or 18 pieces. So really like visually impacting body of work. And I like to display these works in a place that also has a auditorium. And I would like to host an event where I can invite people to come and explore these works, and then to come and gather together in that auditorium and sit down and have a conversation about creativity and have a conversation about the influence of these works. I love sharing my story because I feel like, you know, there was a moment where I had a decision to make. I made a decision, and then I chose in that moment, through the influence of my mom, really, who I lost, she passed away in January, to look for the positive. And in the process of pursuing creativity, helped me heal my body. It caused me to not have regret about the accident. And it opened up a whole new channel in my life. We wouldn't be sitting here today without that accident, right? So I want to be able to share that with people as a way of inspiring them around the power of creativity. And I want the work to be so large, so deep, so broad, that it's just so apparent that what I say is true.
I really like your positive energy since the first time I talked to you a few weeks ago. And I think you're a great example of how to turn around something that is negative, like the accident. I mean, many people would have said, okay, stop horse riding, I'm done, I hate that horse. And instead, you are an example about forgiveness and how that accident became something positive in your life and change your path. And we are talking today, which probably was not going to be possible if that didn't happen.
That's right.
And I hope this episode of our Morning Brew Series can be an inspiration for many people that are like listening right now. And I ask you that last question because I always say, if you have a wish, put it out loud and bold in the universe. Yes. And I really hope that is going to become reality for you in the future. And if that happens, I want an invitation from you.
I promise you, I'll send it to you. It'll be on the list.
Okay, we have a deal. So anyway, it's 8:50. So there were like few questions. I want to thank you again for this morning.
Yes.
And thank everyone for participating. We're going to send a recap email with all James' info and the Santa Fe gallery. So if you want to go to meet him in person, just contact him directly. And we are gonna see you guys on August 20 for our next event. And in the meantime, I wish you all a great day, and I hope we inspire you with James' story. And thank you again, James.
Thank you.